So I'm going to just go through like 3 problems with the Canadian medical system for you. So I know that many people think that the Canadian medical system is very idyllic. They think, you know, Canadians get everything for free. And I mean, this is true that we do have good coverage, and it is very good to have that coverage and that access for anyone for acute problems. So if you were to get an infection, or if you were to have a baby, or you broke your leg, or you were in a car accident and you were injured, our system would pay for your treatment. And that is great that we have that available. Also, cancer, if you had a primary cancer and that primary cancer was treated with a few rounds of chemotherapy and your cancer never came back, all of your treatment for that primary cancer would be covered. The problem, though, is people who have secondary cancer. We need totally different treatment, but because it's cancer, our government still says that they will cover it. So primary or secondary cancer or metastatic cancer, the drugs are not paid for by the insurance company, they're paid for by our government. Now, this leads to a couple of problems for cancer patients. So the first problem is that the insurance in Canada basically will cover nothing for cancer. So if I wanted a Foundation 1 test, which most insurance companies in the States will cover for patients, and I hear all the time from people down in the States that they've had multiple Foundation 1 tests and that their insurance has paid for 100% of it multiple times. But up here in Canada, I can't get a Foundation 1 test because the government won't pay for it, and of course my insurance company won't pay for it. So even with the financial help that's offered in Canada, I'm still going to be paying $3,000 out of pocket every time that I want to get a Foundation 1 test. And basically, anytime my cancer spreads to a new location, I might want to know if my markers have changed because it affects my treatment. But in Canada, I cannot get the test to test for those markers unless I pay for it out of pocket at $3,000 a pop. So in that regard, I end up being worse off than someone in the States. And once I've had the test for the biomarkers, many of those drugs aren't available in Canada yet. Because the government covers the cost of cancer meds, all of our cancer meds have to go through an arduous process to even get coverage in Canada. They have to, first of all, be approved by Health Canada to say that they are okay, that you will be healthy if you take the drugs, that they won't hurt you. And this takes time beyond what it takes for the FDA, because the FDA will already have approved the drug at this time, and then Health Canada has to reapprove it for our system, for Canada. And then the drug has to go through a number of different steps to make sure it's financially viable for the Canadian system. So as a Canadian, many of the drugs that a Foundation 1 test would test for that target specific mutations, so like new age drugs, I'm not able to access those drugs. And, a drug might have been approved in 2018 in the States, and I still don't have access to it here in Canada. So instead of getting newer drugs, here in Canada, I'm given like 20-year-old chemos and told to go to hospice. So that's another problem with the Canadian system, that it's taking a really long time for us to get the drugs into our system here. And of course, if a drug is approved by Health Canada, they've told us that it's a good drug and that it's not going to hurt you. You would think that maybe a private insurance company would cover that drug until the point that it was covered by the province. But unfortunately, this is not the case. Private insurance companies basically step away from cancer, and they like metastatic cancer, and they don't cover anything because they kind of think, well, that's the province's job to do that. That's a thing that the province has taken over. All cancer treatment is covered by the province. So the other problem with Canada is that they put really tight restrictions on the drug. So once the drug's gone through this arduous multi-year process to be covered by the province, you still might not be able to get access to it as a cancer patient. So you might have been really excited about this drug that targets your specific cancer or your specific mutation, but by the time it gets covered in Canada, you've actually done too many treatments prior to that drug being available to even access that drug. So an example is Ibrance. You actually cannot have Ibrance if you've had more, and Ibrance is a drug for estrogen-positive cancer, which is the most common type of breast cancer. In Alberta, if you've had more than one chemo line, you can't get access to Ibrance. So what this means is any patient who's had metastatic cancer for a while, they're unlikely to be able to get access to newer drugs. And why they do this is because they want to be 100% sure that that drug's going to work. So instead of trying it in a patient, They just say, no, you can't have it because you've had too many lines of treatment. And when the clinical trials were done, no one was allowed to have more than one line of chemotherapy. So since that was the case for the clinical trials, you aren't allowed either. Now, if we were going to test the drug in a patient to see if it worked for that individual patient, we would likely only have to give the patient that drug for between 3 and 6 months. And then we would see whether it worked or not. And it would be pretty cut and dry because a scan would either show progression of the cancer or it wouldn't. But instead of doing that, the Canadian system basically says, well, if you want the drug, you can pay for it out of pocket. And these drugs are costing patients like $100,000 a year. So in this way, we think that it's cheaper to live in Canada, but in fact, as a metastatic cancer patient, it's actually more expensive. And this is very, very concerning to me as a cancer patient, knowing that there are several drug lines that I'm not able to get access to, and knowing by the time that those drugs are available, I probably won't be able to access them because I'll be too far gone as a metastatic patient. I'll have done too many lines of chemo to get access for new drugs. So instead of being hopeful that new drugs are going to come on the market, I'm not able to access those drugs, and that's completely unfair. So we have a lot of problems in Canada with this drug access, and it's something that needs to be a conversation and it needs to be changed because we're coming into a time when a lot of patients are having these Foundation 1 tests and we're able to target individual cancers better and say, your cancer has this mutation, so we're going to do this treatment on you. But because of the way the Canadian system works, it's very, very tightly regulated and, it's not up to date. We don't have the tests for the mutations being covered by our government. We don't have the new medications making it into our country in a timely manner. And once the medications get here, we're using old science to deny patients the treatments. Now, I know for many of you, this is not a problem because you do not have metastatic cancer, but I guarantee you that the day before I got metastatic cancer, I knew nothing about this and I didn't care. And the day after, it became the most important thing in the world to me because I wanted to be able to stay alive. And it could happen to anyone. You may think that you eat too healthy for it to happen to you. You may think that you don't have the risk because no one in your family has had cancer. That's just not how cancer works. I was eating relatively healthy. I was exercising. I was not drinking at all. I actually drank less than anyone else I knew. I was a normal weight. I don't smoke, and I still got cancer. So if it can happen to me, it can happen to any of you. And this is something you should care about before it happens to you. So by the time that it happens to you, you don't have to worry about it the way that I do. I know people in Canada who are having to pay $100,000 out of pocket to access drugs that would be covered in the States. So in that way, we are worse off than people are in the States for people with metastatic cancer, and something needs to change.